Welcome to the Diplomacy as Tensei as a String newsletter, where we decode global tensions in easy to understand, easy to laugh language, but not easy to deceive. Today, we will explore a topic that is hotter than a Sichuan hot pot in the middle of summer: progress in US-China trade negotiations. Yes, after months of each person taxing, each person yelling, suddenly, Washington and Beijing are smiling and shaking hands, as if the US had never banned TikTok and China had banned Google. Negotiations between the US and China have long been more than just economic matters. It is a long-running political drama, where every word is pre-written by 3 advisors, censored by 5 lawyers, and still makes global markets fluctuate like Bitcoin at midnight. In this round of negotiations, people witnessed unexpectedly cool signals. The US temporarily suspended additional tariffs on electronic goods. China promised to buy more US agricultural products. And both sides smiled, although it seemed a bit forced. But don't be too quick to believe the surface, because in US-China relations, a handshake can be a sign of peace, or a step to prepare for a sudden wrist squeeze. So, in the end, is this trade progress a real breakthrough, or just a temporary truce for both sides to take advantage of elections and buy time? In today's video, we will peel back each layer, from the history of tensions, the key details of the new agreement, to an analysis of the long-term consequences and the future of the global trade order, of course, with a few sarcastic headlines and many brink-of-war smiles. Brace yourself, because international politics is never easy to predict, but always worth analyzing deeply and laughing out loud. In this round of negotiations, people testified unexpectedly cool signals. The US temporarily suspended additional tariffs on electronic goods. China promised to buy more US agricultural products. And both sides smiled, although it seemed a bit forced. But don't be too quick to believe the surface, because in US-China relations, a handshake can be a sign of peace, or a step to prepare for a sudden wrist squeeze. So, in the end, is this trade progress a real breakthrough, or just a temporary truce for both sides to take advantage of elections and buying time? In today's video, we will peel back each layer, from the history of tensions, the key details of the new agreement, to an analysis of the long-term consequences and the future of the global trade order. Of course, with a few sarcastic headlines and many brink-of-war smiles. Brace yourself, because international politics is never easy to predict, but always worth analyzing deeply and laughing out loud. And China? They responded with a self-sufficiency strategy, while smiling in the news as if it were all part of the plan. And during that period, each side had its own spokesperson who, after listening to him, could be mistaken for an international press conference. And a college debate. The US said, "We protect intellectual property rights." China replied, "We have never stolen. Just learn quickly." The US said, "We are balancing the trade balance." China, the balance is tilted because the US spends too much on Chinese goods. The climax was the 2018-2020 tariff war that resulted in hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods being heavily taxed, forcing many US businesses to find partners outside of China. And farmers in Iowa, waiting for China to buy beans like waiting for their wives to come home from the market. In other words, these two economies are like a couple who are at odds, but cannot divorce, because their common assets are too large and lawyers are too expensive. And so, for nearly 5 years, although there have been times when they have shunned each other and times when they have reconciled, the US and China have maintained a relationship of not liking each other, but still needing each other. After years of war of words and tax on tax, many people thought that the US and China would forever be like two fighters in the octagon. But no! Last month, the two unexpectedly sat down together, exchanging not with a hard-as-steel note, but with diplomatic smiles and a list of goods to buy and sell. So what is special about the new agreement? According to what was announced, and what was not announced but revealed because of leaks, then 1. The US temporarily suspended tariffs on electronics and consumer goods from China, which are forcing Americans to buy iPhones at the price of round-trip airfare. 2. China pledges to buy more US agricultural products, from soybeans and corn to pork and beef. In other words, China eats, US farmers are happy, and the government, grabs political points. 3. The two sides agree to cooperate on technology within a safe framework, although the concept of safe is as vague as TikTok's privacy policy. 4. Investment barriers will be gradually removed, facilitating capital flows. But of course, gradually here could mean months or years depending on the election situation. But is this really a breakthrough? Don't celebrate like you've just won the lottery, because this is not a free trade agreement. It's more like a trial contract between two people who have sued each other in court. There are no long-term legal commitments. That means if Trump gets excited tomorrow or Xi Jinping changes his strategy, everything will be back to square one. Most importantly, core disputes such as technology, cyber espionage, and control of the South China Sea have not been touched. This agreement is like patching up a pair of pants with a hole in the knee, while the hole in the back has not been fixed. And don't forget, each side is still trying to act deeply to please their domestic audience. The US says, we forced China to make concessions. China says, we just bought a little more to support our friends. Meanwhile, netizens from both countries competed to create memes, from pandas shaking hands with eagles to Xi Jinping cosplaying as a Texas cowboy. And so, a tariff ceasefire agreement was signed. But don't forget, between superpowers, every agreement is like a promise of a civilized farewell. Everyone knows, the story doesn't end there. Immediately after the US-China trade deal was announced, the world had enough emotions to write a political symphony. 1. Global investors. Stocks soared as if they had just drunk Red Bull. Wall Street breathed a sigh of relief, because at least, there was no new round of tariffs to cause the market to fluctuate. 2. Big tech companies, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, can finally sleep well without worrying about Uncle Trump tweeting a tariff war tomorrow morning. 3. US farmers. Finally, soybeans have customers again. After months of filling up warehouses, they can now be sent to China, where nitrogen is needed more than ever. 1. Traditional US allies in Europe and Asia. They worry that a US-China partnership could push the EU and smaller countries to the edge, like being invited to a buffet and then locked out of the gate. 2. India and Japan, two countries that are investing heavily in China-free supply chains, are now worried that the US will change its mind and turn around from Beijing, leaving them as helpless as an ex-lover who has not been informed. 3. Human rights and environmental groups. Hey, what about human rights violations? What about industrial pollution, they wonder? But it is clear that in the global trade game, soybeans seem to be more preferred than democracy. Ordinary people, most of them don't understand what the deal says, but they're happy to see iPhones are $100 cheaper. Shenzhen-made TVs are still available at Best Buy, and TikTok hasn't been banned, at least not this week. The US-China trade deal may be a sign of detente, but is it genuine friendship or just temporary comradeship for profit? Let's analyze a few potential scenarios in a half-serious, half-laughing style. Scenario 1. Full trade alliance in his dream, and only in his dream. China becomes the #1 trading partner. Trump tweeted, China is doing very well. Thank you, President Xi, my friend. Very smart, very strong. Greatest deal in human history. Meanwhile, Beijing also played back. The US is a reliable trading partner. When they are not angry, the world breathes a sigh of relief. Chip prices fall. Tech tycoons celebrate at an Asian buffet. Scenario 2. Shake hands first, punch later. Both sides are happy for a few months. Then one side changes its mind. Maybe the US accuses China of stealing technology. Or China bans US beef imports because the feelings are no longer the same. Trump angrily tweeted, I used to trust China. Now I don't. They lied to us. Terrible. The press calls this Chapter 3, Donald's anger, the end or the beginning. Scenario 3. Break up like adults. Both sides realize there are too many contradictions and withdraw from the agreement. The US returns to its decoupling strategy, while China increases trade with Russia, India, and the BRICS countries. And global companies? They start building factories in Vietnam, Mexico, Turkey, playing a game of who is the least risky trading partner. Scenario 4. US-China continues to act. The deal is not canceled, but it is not really effective. The two sides keep meeting, signing, laughing, and then waiting to see who breaks it first. The media calls this the Schrödinger Agreement, both alive and dead, depending on the time. And international commentators? They have to learn more acting, because most of the time is spent explaining why a handshake can last a whole year without reaching an end. When it comes to US-China trade, everything can change with just a tweet or a diplomatic sneeze. The question is not how long will this deal last, but who will break it first and how to break it with the least embarrassment. So we have swum together through the stormy ocean of US-China trade negotiations, a journey where every tweet from Trump can shake the market, every nod from Beijing can push Apple's stock price up or down by a few $billion, and every meeting is likened to the World Cup finals of the global financial world. From the super high-level verbal battles between Washington and Beijing to the handshakes and kicks, we see clearly. Today's trade politics is not just an economic problem, but also a top-notch performance stage. Agreements can be signed, then canceled. Promises can be made, then forgotten. But one thing always remains: China and the US cannot take their eyes off each other, just like two ex-lovers who still owe rent. Although the US is still an economic superpower, with China's breakthrough speed, the balance of power is gradually shifting. And if someone were to ask, will America be number one forever? The most reasonable answer would be, it depends on what election year it is. If you find this video as profound and interesting as a wartime IQ test, don't forget to like the video to let the YouTube algorithm know you have taste. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on political analysis that is both profound and hilariously confusing. Comment below, who do you think is the master negotiator? Trump or Xi? Or Elon Musk? And of course, share this video with your friends, especially those who often debate about China, the US, and the 180-degree turns in international trade. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. You deserve to be called the political expert of the TikTok era. See you in the next video, where we will continue to laugh through tears with the world of global politics.